گے، درود پڑھنے سے اچھی وفات پاؤ گے، درود پڑھنے سے یارو نجات پاؤ گے، محیب و چارد معصوم پر درود پڑھو، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔ درود پڑھ کے پکارا قلم دم ارقا، امین روقل اب تو سنے زباں کی لگا، رسول فاطمہ زہرا ہے اور بالا امام، یہی بزرگ ہے سب لائق درود سلام، محیب و چارد معصوم پر درود پڑھو، اللہم صلی علی محمد۔
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، نہنگ قلزم وغا امیر لشکر حسین، خدنگ ترکش قضا امیر لشکر حسین، برنگ شاہ لا فتح امیر لشکر حسین، جرید لیر با وفا امیر لشکر حسین، وفا بحد معجزہ امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، یہ ذوالفقار حیدری یہ شیر بے شے نجف، یہ تیغ تیز ہاشمی نشان جرت سلب، ہر ایک کا مرکز نظر کفیل تشنگان تف، کنار نہر القما تمام فوج کا ہدف، کسی سے پر نہ رک سکا امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، بہادران صف شکن میں اس جری کے تذکرے، دلاوران تیغ زن میں اس جری کے تذکرے، ہر ایک وفا کی انجمن میں اس جری کے تذکرے، ہر ایک وفا کی انجمن میں اس جری کے تذکرے، رسول پاک کے چمن میں اس جری کے تذکرے، غرور آل مصطفیٰ امیر لشکر حسین، ہزبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، حسین کا اخی بھی ہے، حسین کا غلام بھی، حسین کی سپر بھی ہے، تبر بھی ہے، حسام بھی، حسین کی ذرا بھی ہے، قما بھی ہے، سہام بھی، حسین حکم دے اگر تو شمر سے کلام بھی، وگرنہ وہ کجا کجا امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، حسین اذن دے اگر ابھی یہ سب کو دیکھ لے، ابھی رات و شام کو، ابھی حلب کو دیکھ لے، ابھی ابھی یہ کوفیان بے ادب کو دیکھ لے، مقابلہ جو آ پڑے تو کل عرب کو دیکھ لے، مثال شاہ لا فتح امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، اور اشارہ امام ہو تو فتح میں دھرا ہے کیا، شعاع مہر کے لیے یہ شام کی گھٹا ہے کیا، فرات تک نہ جان دے کسی میں حوصلہ ہے کیا، اور علی کے شیر کے لیے یہ جنگ کربلا ہے کیا، الٹ دے تخت شام کا امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، مگر یہاں تو حکم ہے، مگر یہاں تو حکم ہے کہ بس علی کے شیر بس، حسین اپنی زندگی سے ہو چکا ہے سیر بس، قریب وقت عصر ہے بس اب میرے دلیر بس، ہمارے کوچ میں کہیں مزید ہو نہ دیر بس، کرے گا تاب کر وغا امیر لشکر حسین، زبر دشت نینوا امیر لشکر حسین، اور محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم۔
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والسولة الحيدرية والعصمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكادمية والحجج الردوية والجود الثقفية والنقابة النقبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ويؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatimatul Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When one examines the maqatil and the historical sources about the day of Ashura, you'll find that there are a number of statements of the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada which are found within these historical sources. And each of these statements of the ashab or the companions of the Imam demonstrates the valor and the high spiritual qualities of these individuals. And in reality, there are statements which reflect upon us how should one be a companion of the Imam of their time period. You know, as I mentioned on night one, when it comes to our remembrance of the day of Ashura, it is not simply just a historical remembrance. From the first element, when we remember the day of Ashura, is because there is a devotional element in remembering the day of Ashura. It is through the remembrance of the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada that we're seeking closeness towards Allah. As the tradition of Imam Jaffar al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi mentions, that the Imam, I mentioned the tradition, that the Imam says, Nafasul mahmum lana al-mughtam li dulmina tasbih wa hammuhu li amrina ibadah. The Imam is saying that when it comes to the remembrance of our masayib and musibah of us Ahlul Bayt, that even that sorrowful breathing in the state of sorrow, that becomes the tasbih and the sanctification of Allah. And that sorrow for us is the ibadah of Allah. From this tradition, we understand, number one, that there is that devotional element. But from the second level, our remembrance of the history of Ashura is not a dry historical remembrance. Because when we gather to remember those events, each of us is seeking lessons and guidance from the events which took place upon the day of Ashura. And from amongst those events and those statements one can take guidance from is the statements of the companions of Imam Al-Hussein. And that's why in tonight's discussion, we'll examine these statements of the Imam, we'll see what the qualities of the Ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada were, and we'll see how can we mirror those qualities. And we'll discuss in the following stages. Number one, what does the hadith literature say about the companions of Imam al-Hussein? Number two, what does the ziyarat and the visitation literature say about the companions of Imam al-Hussein? Number three, what 10 statements of the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada can we reflect upon from the day of Ashura, and what can we learn from these 10 statements? And number four, why does one scholar say that it was only Qasim who was said, Kayf al-maut indak, how is death towards you? And based upon these 4 points, we'll discuss tonight about the statements of the ashab of Imam al-Hussein. Now, before coming to the crux of the discussion, the first point of analysis is that what status do the companions of Imam al-Hussein have in the tradition of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? Because when you look, there were many individuals who didn't have the tawfiq and the divine blessing to be from amongst the ashabs of Sayyid al-Shuhada. It's mentioned that as Imam al-Hussein is going from Makkah towards Karbala, one of the halting stations that the Imam stops at was a halting station by the name of Zubala. When Imam al-Hussein stops at Az-Zubala, 2 individuals from the land of Kufa, they come towards another individual in the camp of Imam al-Hussein. That individual says to those 2 men that what is the state in Kufa? They say that we did not leave Kufa except that we saw the body of Muslim bin Aqil being dragged through Kufa in the killing of Hani bin Urwa. After that, that individual is taken to Imam al-Hussein. And he says to the Imam that, O grandson of the Prophet, I have news for you. Can we speak in private? Imam al-Hussein says that whatever you want to say in private to me, you can say in front of my companions. That individual informs him of the martyrdom of Muslim bin Aqil, but it's stated after that there were a number of individuals who left from the caravan of Imam al-Hussein. When it was realized that the situation in Kufa was not a situation in victory, you find a number of individuals, they leave the caravan of Imam al-Hussein, and then there were others like Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi who joins upon the morning of Ashura. In other words, the lesson that we take from this is that sometimes to go upon the path of God, one requires tawfiq and divine blessing. You see, our actions, they create an environment which can lead to further actions as well. For example, in one tradition, a companion comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he says to the Imam that why is it that I can't wake up for Salatul Layl, for the night prayer? The Imam said it is because you sinned and you can't wake up for it. So from this one tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you find that positive action creates more positive action. The verse of the Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا, that those who strive in our way will guide them. In other words, you make that effort, we'll open the doors for you. And when you look at those companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada, these were individuals who were given tawfiq from Allah. Because when you look in the tradition, the first attributes of the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada mentioned within the hadith is that they were the best of companions. Imam Al-Hussein says on the night of Ashura, فَإِنِّي لَا أَعْلَمُ أَصْحَابًا أَوْفَى وَلَا خَيْرًا مِّنْ أَصْحَابِي. That he says, I do not know a group of companions better and more loyal than my companions. At another spot he says, مَا رَأَيْتُ أَصْحَابًا كَأَصْحَابِي. That I have not seen companions like my companions. You see, when it came to others of the Imams, there were some individuals amongst their midst that didn't show the utmost loyalty. But these are those companions, as Zuhair ibn al-Qayn would say, that even if you kill me and you burn my body and I'm brought back to life, you do it 1,000 times, each time I'll sacrifice myself for you, O Abu Abdullah. These are those companions of Imam al-Hussein, and this is their first quality mentioned within the hadith. The second quality mentioned within the hadith about the companions of Imam al-Hussein is that these individuals had acquired the status of yaqeen and conviction. You know, an individual comes to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, and he says to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq that, O Imam, akhbirni an ashab al-Hussein, tell me about the companions of Hussein, who were they? The Imam says, kushifa lahumul ghita, hatta ra'aw manazilahum min al-jannah. These are those individuals that the veils were removed from their eyes until they saw their status in paradise. In another tradition, Imam Zainul Abidin records that Imam al-Hussein tells his companions that you have no more responsibility towards me. You've completed your vow, leave. At that moment they say, O Abu Abdullah, we are not leaving your side. Imam al-Hussein says, then raise your heads. At the moment they raised their heads, the tradition says they saw their reality in paradise. You see, what we take from this tradition is that paradise is created within this world. And this is a fundamental point. You see, when you look in the Quran is mentioning that the reward for our actions is seen in a different form. In other words, our actions within in this world, their form in the hereafter is the reward. The Quran says, إِنَّمَا تُجْزَوْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Your reward is what you carry out. Now I'll give you another example. The verse of the Quran says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ دَرَّةَ خَيْرٍ فَيَرَى. In other words, the Quran says that whoever sees an atoms of good will see it on the day of judgment. And whoever sees does an atom of evil will see it on the day of judgment. I say, oh Allah, an action is something carried out in time. How will I see it in paradise? In other words, that heaven and those heavenly realities can manifest when your actions are upon that right path. You know, there was an individual who comes to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And when he comes to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq, he says, oh Imam, where can I go and find the paradise of this world? The Imam says, I'll tell you something. If you hold on to this reality, you will never leave paradise. The companion says, what do you mean that I'll never leave paradise? The Imam says, in reality, the wilaya of us Ahlul Bayt is that paradise. And those companions of Hussein, by having that yaqeen and certainty in Ahlul Bayt and in the religion, they were able to see their paradise upon this earth. So when you look in the hadith, the second quality of the ashab of Hussein is that they were at the status of conviction. The third quality mentioned in the hadith about the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada is that they are the companions like the companions of Rasulullah were martyred with Rasulullah. Imam al-Baqir says in a tradition that the companions who were martyred alongside Imam al-Hussein are like those who were martyred alongside Rasulullah. In other words, Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Hussein, that Hussein is from me, I'm from Hussein. that Imam Al-Hussein reflects the same reality as Rasulullah. And to support Hussein is to support Rasulullah. So you find this is the third quality of the companions of Imam Al-Hussein mentioned within the hadith. The fourth quality of the companions of Imam Al-Hussein found within the hadith is that each of them has been given the title Sayyid al-Shuhada, or the Master of the Martyrs. Now some may say that Sayyid al-Shuhada we thought is only the title of Imam al-Hussein. But when you look within the hadith, you find Imam al-Baqir quotes a tradition. There's a tradition that Rasulullah is speaking to Imam al-Hussein. And he says, "Oh Hussein, you will be killed in Karbala. Tansuruhu isabatun min al-Muslimin. There will be a group of Muslims who help you, O Hussein. Ulaika sadati shuhada'i ummati yawm al-qiyamah." That these individuals will be the leaders of the martyrs. So according to the hadith, even these individuals were Sayyid al-Shuhada. And the fifth quality of the companions of Imam al-Hussein is that it is stated in one tradition, quoted in the Amali of Shaykh al-Suduq, that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he meets a Jewish individual. That Jewish individual says that it is written within the Torah, within our works, that there will be a martyr from the offspring of a prophet. And those who are martyred with him, they will be in paradise even before the sweat of their horses dries. That when it comes to Sayyid al-Shuhada, these are those individuals that because they supported the Imam, that with speed the reality of paradise became available to these individuals. So you find all of these realities are mentioned within the hadith. But if you want to summarize all of these hadith, you find it's summarized in the different ziyarat about the companions of Imam al-Hussein. You know, there is one ziyarat known as Ziyaratul Rajabiyah. Within that ziyarah, when you address the companions of Imam al-Hussein, you say, "Assalamu alaikum ya ayyuhar rabbaniyun." You are those individuals who are at that lordly status, that the reality of Rububiyyah and God's lordship has manifested within your heart. And really a more proper translation for Rububiyyah is to nurture. That God is the nurturer. These people are Rabbani because they molded themselves in that path that God wanted them to be molded. Then after that, in that ziyarah, you say that you are the ones who were chosen for Hussein. Bi abi amtum wa ummi, that may my mother and my father be sacrificed for you, O companions of Imam al-Hussein. You see this line, that may my mother and my father be sacrificed for you, O companions of Imam al-Hussein, would be a line that's something small if you or I just said it. But this ziyarat is coming from an Imam of Ahlul Bayt. And the father of an Imam is whom is no other than an Imam. In other words, an infallible Imam is saying that may my father, another Imam, be sacrificed for you, O Ashab of Hussein. We read in the ziyarah, we say, Assalamu alaikum ya awliya Allah wa ahibba'ahu. That, O Ashab of Hussein, you are the beloved of Allah and you have the love of Allah. Assalamu alaikum ya asfiya Allah wa awidda'ahu. And you were the chosen ones, and you carry that love for God. But then after that you say, Assalamu alaikum ya ansara din Allah. That salam be upon you, the supporters of the religion of Allah. You know, each of us knows that in a final moment you say the shahada. You say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadar Rasulullah. But nowhere in the historical sources is it written that the companions of Imam al-Hussein were saying that in their final moment. If they were saying anything in their final moment, They were saying, Alayka minni salam ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. In other words, they realized that to focus on the Imam is to focus on the reality of God. That their tawheed was Sayyid al-Shuhada. And they knew to hold on to him was that fastest route towards paradise. You know, Imam Al-Hussein, on the night before Ashura, he says to his companions that Hadihil Jannah, that this paradise is before you. You know, there's a difference between saying this and that. This implies proximity. That implies something which is far. When the Quran speaks of paradise, it says Tilkal Jannah, that paradise. It wants to incite mankind that, oh mankind, do not become lax. Do not stop working. Do not become relaxed. That paradise over there. But when it came to the companions of Imam Al-Hussein, the Imam is saying, this paradise is in front of you. Those are the companions of Imam Al-Hussein. You know, in that ziyarah, after you say the lines, Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Rasulullah, that, oh companions of Imam Al-Hussein, you are the companions of Rasulullah in reality, and the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Janab al-Zahra and Imam al-Hasan. After that, you say, Tibtum. وَطَابَتِ الْأَرْضُ الَّتِي فِيهَا دُفِنْتُمْ. That not only are you blessed, but even that land which touches you, that land which you're buried in, even that becomes blessed. But for a person to reach that status, there needs to be certain qualities within a person. And when we examine these 10 statements out of the many statements of the companions of Imam Al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, we'll begin to move in the direction of gaining that understanding as to what qualities they had that allowed them to reach their status. You see, the first of the statements which I'll examine is a statement which took place in the morning time on the day of Ashura. You know, Imam Al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, he strategically brought all of the tents together. That way the tents of the women are covered and the women of Ali Muhammad are protected. Then after that, he ordered his companions to dig a trench on the backside of the tent. And he filled it with wood and he lit it on fire. Because Imam Al-Hussein knew that these individuals, they would attack from all sides. If there is a trench in the back behind the tents, then the battle will take place face to face up front. But as Imam Al-Hussein ordered for that trench, the wood within it to be burnt, shimmer begins to ride to the side of Imam Al-Hussein. And as shimmer is riding, Imam Al-Hussein says it looks as if shimmer is coming. A group of people reply by saying that yes, indeed, it is shimmer. At that point, the first statement of analysis is that Muslim ibn al-Awsaja says that may I be sacrificed for you, O Aba Abdullah. If you allow me, I will fire my arrow at him because he's at such a distance that my arrow won't miss. And this individual who is a transgressor and the greatest of oppressors, this individual would die. Imam Al-Hussein says to Muslim bin Awsaja, O Muslim, I do not want to be the one who begins battle upon this day. That this is Sayyid al-Shuhada, Rahmatullah al-Wasi'ah, that expansive mercy, Sayyid al-Shuhada. But within this line of Muslim, we learn two qualities about the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The first quality we learn when Muslim says, may I be sacrificed for you, O Aba Abdullah. In other words, the ashab of Imam Al-Hussein recognized that when you come to the doorstep of an Imam or you come to the doorstep of Rasulullah, there needs to be adab and etiquette when you come to their doorstep. When you look at many of the works of hadith, when you go to ziyarah, it tells you how to go to ziyarah, that before you leave, you do ghusl. Upon the route, you recite this dua. You stand at the door, you say Allahu Akbar. Then you go forward, you say Allahu Akbar. In this manner, there's a full system of etiquette which is given. In the same way, the majlis of Imam Al-Hussein has adab and etiquette. You know, many of you who are older, you may remember your parents, that when the majlis was there, they would sit you on the ground. They would say, wear black clothes when you come to the gathering. Make sure your socks aren't ripped when you go towards the majlis. My father would say the same thing to me as well. But all of this was to build adab and etiquette. And the greatest etiquette of these majalis is that when you come to these majalis, you come in halatul aza, in a state of mourning. That it shouldn't be as if it's a gathering of celebration or a festival. But when you come over here, at the very minimum, you act as if somebody from your family has died. And the reason I say at the very minimum, because who is our family and who is the family of Rasulullah? So you find that is the first thing that we learn from the statement of Muslim. The second thing that we learn from the statement of Muslim is when the Imam said, "O Muslim, I don't want to begin the battle." Muslim bin Osaja doesn't say, "But what if this or what if that?" He listens to the Imam. The second quality of the Ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada is that these are those individuals who are at the maqam and the status of submission. You know, on the day of Siffin, you find that Malik al-Ashtar had come so close to the tent of Muawiyah that if he had gone forward for just a few more minutes, he would have killed one of the greatest enemies of Ahlul Bayt. But at that point, you find when the army became misguided, as Malik al-Ashtar is approaching the tent of Muawiyah, a messenger comes and says, "O Malik, come back." You can imagine the struggle at that moment. That Malik was an individual with passion just like us. Malik knows one of the greatest enemies of Ali Muhammad is within the reach of his sword. But at the same time, Malik recognizes that the Imam of my time has commanded me. Malik, he returns. This is what you see in the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada as well. So you find this is the first of the 10 statements that I'll examine. The second statement on the day of Ashura, it's stated in the morning of Ashura, there was one individual on the side of Imam al-Hussein, a companion who was martyred, by the name of Abdul Rahman ibn Abdul Rabbi, who was speaking to Burayr ibn al-Khudayr. It's stated that both of them are standing next to each other. On the other side, in the morning, the army of Umar bin Saad is gathering to attack. At that moment, as they're standing next to each other, Burayr is being lighthearted and joking and smiling. Abdul Rahman bin Abdul Rabbi says, "Oh Burayr, we're about to be attacked. There's an army of 30,000. You're being frivolous. You're being joyous." Burayr says, "Oh individual, in my youth, I was not an individual of making jokes. Do you think in my old age I would be such an individual? But the reason that I am in this state is because all that is between us and paradise is the attacking of these individuals with their swords. And if that is all which is between us and paradise, then let them attack us at this moment." You see, this is that conviction of the Ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada. We see etiquette and adab. We see submission. Over here, we see yaqeen and conviction. Many people, they ask that why is it my heart doesn't incline to prayer, or my heart does not incline towards fasting or towards the deen? One answer is because we don't have conviction. The tradition of Ahlul Bayt says that if you recognize who you're before, then your head wouldn't raise from the ground from sajda. That in other words, if you recognize and felt the presence of God, then at that point, you wouldn't even want to lift your head from the ground in reverence out of God. But these are those companions who saw that reality. So the first statement, the statement of Muslim min Osaja. The second statement, the statement of Borer. The third statement from the day of Ashura is that when the battle is beginning upon that day, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, he gives a sermon to the army of Umar bin Saad. When Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, he gives this sermon, he says, O people of Kufa, I am warning you of God's punishment. And it is upon a Muslim to advise his brothers. And as long as the swords are not fighting between us, we are brothers. But the moment the swords they begin, then there is no amnesty. Do you not know that the family of the Prophet was a test for this ummah? That how do you treat them and how do you view them? You see, in this first portion of the line of Zuhair, he mentions the point that the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet were a test for the ummah. Rasulullah said very famously, the verse of the Quran which quotes the Prophet, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. That I ask for nothing except love for my family. You see, many people, they ask this question. That, God could have just placed the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Quran and said, Ashhadu anna Aliyan waliyullah, and after him Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and the 12 Imams. But when Zuhair says that the family of the Prophet was a test, it goes to show the ummah was tested, that did you obey Ahlul Bayt? But that same question can be applied, that God could have just made a cloud that said Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and everyone would be a Muslim. But you find that God, He covers the realities to give that test. Because without that test, one cannot reach the maximum elevation possible. So Zuhair says to them in this statement, that do you individuals over here, O people of Kufa, he says to them, do you not know that the family of the Prophet was a test for you? And that these two individuals, referring to Ibn Ziyad and Yazid, that no goodness will come in their rule. Then after that he says to them, these individuals, they will drag your eyes out, they will cut your limbs, they will torture you, they will hang you from the date palm trees, they will kill the best of you, the reciters of the Quran, in the way they killed Hujr ibn Adi and his companions, and they killed Hani ibn Urwa, and they killed others who were like him. When Zuhair reaches this point in the sermon, the people from the army of Umar bin Saad, they begin to say that, O Zuhair, we will not leave you alone until we kill you or we send you all towards Ibn Ziyad. Zuhair says that how are you people? You prefer the son of Sumayya to the son of Fatima to Zahra. After that, Shimar comes to Zuhair. Shimar says, soon both you and your leader will be in the fire of hell. You know what Zuhair says? Zuhair says, O Shimar, death besides Hussein is better than a life of eternity with you, O Shimar. You see, these statements of the companions of Imam Al-Hussein show that the first quality I mentioned is that these are those individuals who had etiquette. Number two, at the level of submission. Number three, they were at the level of certainty and conviction. But number four, these are those companions who drowned themselves in the love of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That one word and negativity said towards the Imam, they couldn't handle those lines of negativity. So you find this is the third of the 10 statements. The next statement of importance, which demonstrates the qualities of the companions of Imam al-Hussein, even though each is of importance, is that upon that day, there was a sermon which was given by Borer as well. As the battle is going on, Borer ibn al-Khudayr, He says to Imam Al-Hussein that, can I have permission to speak? When the Imam gives him permission, Burair says, O people, this is the grandson of Rasulullah, in which Rasulullah, Inna Allah Azza wa Jal ba'ata Muhammadan bashiran wa nadiran wa da'iyan ilallahi bi'idnihi wa sirajan munira. That Allah sent this prophet as the bringer of good news and a warner and a caller to his path, and that lamp giving light. And then after that he says to that army that this furat over here, even the dogs and the pigs are allowed to drink from this furat. But you deny this water to the grandson of Rasulullah. You see, this is that level that these individuals reach the status of self-sacrifice. You see, they weren't concerned about themselves. Each of them is concerned about Imam Al-Hussein and even one another. You know, it's written in the Maqtal that as the day of Ashura went on, each of these companions, they would compete with each other to be the first to be martyred. This is that maqam. The Quran says, it was a very hot day. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. On the day of Yamama, you find that on that day, there were many individuals who were upon the ground, and they were dying of thirst. The tradition says there were 7 individuals. When water was given to the first said, no, give it to the second. The second said, give it to the third. They go all the way to 7. When the 7th person gets there with the water, the 7th person says no and give it to that first person. When he goes back to the first person had died, the second, the third, all 7 die. At that moment, this verse was revealed on Rasulullah, وَيُؤْتِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they prefer others to themselves even though they are in need. You see, this quality manifests in the companions of Imam Al-Hussein. So after examining the statement of Muslim, and the statement of Zuhair, and then the statement of Burair, and the speech of Zuhair, and the speech of Burair, you find after that, the 5th statement from the day of Ashura occurs in a dialogue between Shimar and Habib ibn Madahir. Shimar looks towards Imam al-Hussein and he says, "O Hussein, you are an individual who worships God upon a fringe, upon an edge." There's an ayat of the Quran, chapter 22, verse 11. It says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. There's a group of individuals that when they worship Allah, the quality of their worship is that if it's like it's on a fringe, it's on a needle, it's on something sharp. In other words, they'll follow the religion when it's convenient for them. But when there is material loss being taken, then they turn away from the religion. What is Islam? Who is Muhammad? It doesn't matter at that point. This verse was in relation to a group of Bedouins that when they would come to Rasulullah, they would accept Islam. But if there was any material loss that happened after accepting Islam, or Islam required something difficult of them, they said, "Khalas, Khudafis Rasulullah." That is it. The Quran says they worship Allah on an edge. Shimar says this line to Imam al-Hussein. You know what Habib ibn Madahir says? Habib says, then you worship God upon 70 edges. And he says that you do not understand the statements of Hussein because your heart has become sealed. You see, what does it mean for somebody's heart to be sealed? The Quran says, وَخَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ, that God has sealed their hearts. God only seals the hearts of a group of people when they themselves have spiraled into an abyss. Once their own actions keep going from bad to worse, only then the heart is sealed. Otherwise, a person who is on the path of righteousness, the heart of that person can't be sealed. So you find this is the fifth statement. The sixth statement from the day of Ashura of the companions of Imam Al-Hussein of importance is a statement by a companion who was martyred by the name of Abu Tumama. Abu Tumama's name was Amr ibn Abdullah as-Sa'idi. As the time of Dhuhr approaches, the army of Umar bin Saad is fighting and fighting. Abu Tumama says to Imam Al-Hussein that, "Oh my master, I see that they are approaching us to kill you. But oh Hussein, they will not kill you until they kill me first. And I do not want to meet my Lord until I have prayed Salatul Dhuhr." Imam al-Hussein says a line to him. Imam al-Hussein says to him that you remembered your salat. May Allah make you amongst those who remember prayer and who remember Him. You know, oftentimes in majalis, you'll hear a khatib, a zakir say that there were people praying on both sides. There were people reciting the Quran on both sides. I say historically, no one was stopping the pray on the army of Umar bin Saad. If there was anyone who stopped to pray, it was Abu Tumama and Imam al-Hussein and the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The reciters of the Quran like Burair and Habib ibn Madahir, who would finish the Quran in one side or on the side of Hussein. So you find this is that reality. So you find within the statement, this individual recognized the value of prayer and they recite Salatul Khawf. You see, prayer is that reality. When a person stands up in prayer and they're standing straight, they say Allahu Akbar. At that moment when you're standing, you are standing in between hope and fear. What's in front of you symbolizes hope. What is behind you symbolizes fear. That this prayer itself is a journey and a lesson, O mankind. The entire journey of life is found within this prayer. So you find after this statement, this was statement number 6 from the day of Ashura. Statement number 7, which we'll examine, is a statement by a companion by the name of Sayyid ibn Abdullah. You see, Sayyid ibn Abdullah was an elderly individual. This individual would tie his back so his back could be straight. He says, "Oh Imam, I'm too elderly to fight, but this body still has energy to take arrows." When Imam al-Hussein stood up for prayer, Zuhair ibn al-Qain and Sayyid ibn Abdullah would stand in front of the Imam. And Sayyid, as he stands there, he takes arrow after arrow into his body. When the Imam finishes his prayer, Sayyid falls on the ground. And as he falls on the ground, he says that may Allah curse you people in the way He cursed the people of Ad who Nabi Hud was sent to, and the people of Thamud, of course, who Nabi Saleh were sent to. And he says, "Oh Allah, send my salawat upon the Prophet and tell him of my wounds, because it is for you that I defended his offspring." You see, what you see from this individual is that you see these individuals were absorbed in the ishq of Rasulullah. So this is the 7th statement. The 8th statement of the companions, which is worthy of consideration, is that there was a companion by the name of Abis ibn Abi Shabib al-Shakiri. Abis, in his final moments, he says a line which is very profound. And he says a line that each of us needs to reflect upon. He says, "O Aba Abdullah, if I had anything more valuable than my life to give towards you, I would give that towards you. But I don't have anything more value, so that is in your way, O Hussein." You see, what does Abis teach us? Abis teaches us that when it comes to giving in the path of God, you give that which is the most dearest towards you. You don't give that which is going to be forgotten in a week. The Quran says, "Lan tanalul birra hatta tunfiqu mimma tuhibbun." that you will not reach piety until you give that which you love the most. You see, this is the example of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So you find that this was the next statement. The eighth statement from the day of Ashura, which is important to analyze, is the statement of a companion by the name of Basheed ibn Amr al-Hadrami. Basheed ibn Amr al-Hadrami was an individual that when he comes to the land of Karbala, he hears that his son has been captured in Kufa. When he heard that his son has been captured, Imam Al-Hussein says to Basheed ibn Amr al-Hadrami that, "Oh Basheed, you are allowed to go. Your vow is completed. In other words, paradise is already for you." Many of you are parents within this hall. You know how difficult it is when your child falls into difficulty. Now listen to the reply of Basheed. Basheed says that, "May the animals of the desert devour me if I leave you, O Hussein." In other words, there is no worry bigger than your worry. Our personal problems are small in front of the Masayib of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You find this is that lesson which Basheed he teaches us. The ninth statement from the day of Ashura is the statement of Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. You know, when Hur comes to the side of Imam al-Hussein, Hur he says, "Allahumma inni tubtu ilayka," that, "Oh Allah, I am turning towards you, fatub alay." I am turning to you, so you turn to me. You know, we understand what it means to turn to Allah. But what does it mean that Allah turns to us? Because one of the divine names is At-Tawwab, the one who turns. And the Quran, it says, has an ayat which says, فَتَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ تَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَتُوبُوا. That God turned to them so they could repent and turn to Him. In other words, when we repent and we turn to Allah, God turns to us twice, we turn to Him one time. And what that means is that the first turning of Allah is the recognition that we've made a mistake. That very guilt within us is God turning to us, and at that moment we turn towards Him. And of course, that 10th statement, which is important to consider from the day of Ashura, is one which in reality occurred on Laylatul Ashura, which is a part of that day. And that is that statement where Imam Al-Hussein, he looks at his companions and he extinguishes the candle. He says, "Whichever of you wants to leave can leave." But when that candle turns on, you find that all of them are there. Imam Al-Hussein, he begins to list the names of the companions. And it's stated as he's listing the names of the companions, there was a 13-year-old child roughly by the name of Qasim who would wait for his name to be called. As the name of Ali Asghar is called and everyone is called, Qasim goes to his uncle, and Qasim he says that, "Oh my uncle, why am I not upon this list?" The Imam says, "Kayf al-maut indak ya Qasim," that how do you find death? And Qasim he says, "Ahla min al-asal," I find it sweeter than honey. You know, Sheikh one alim would mention, why did Imam al-Hussein only ask Qasim this? And I'll tell you what he said at the end of the musibah. But to understand the masayib of Qasim, you have to understand the musibah of Imam al-Hasan. Because this is that mazloom and oppressed son of a mazloom father. Imam al-Hasan is that one that after that reconciliation with Muawiyah, Imam al-Hasan is standing on the prayer mat. They pull the prayer mat from underneath Imam al-Hasan and they stab Imam al-Hasan with a knife within his thigh. That Mufid writes this in Al-Irshad. This is Imam al-Hasan. You know, when Imam al-Hasan was poisoned, a time it came when he begins to vomit his liver. And as he's vomiting his liver, he says, "Oh Hussein, cover the bowl." Imam al-Hussein says, "Why should I cover the bowl?" Imam al-Hassan says, "I don't want Zainab to see this moment." But I say, "Oh Imam al-Hassan, look on the day of Ashura, what did Zainab see? That as she comes out of the tent, وَالشِّمَرْ جَالِسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِ الْحُسَيْنِ, that this is that Zainab, oh Imam al-Hassan." After that, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he begins to cry. Imam al-Hassan says, "Atabki alayya ya Aba Abdullah, abki alayk." That, "Oh Hussein, you cry over me. In reality, I cry over you. La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah." That there is no day like your day, O Hussein. But as Imam al-Hassan is upon his deathbed, it's stated that a child comes and sits upon the chest of Imam al-Hassan. Farwa moves quickly to remove that child. Imam al-Hassan says, "Oh Farwa, let Qasim stay upon my chest." And Imam al-Hassan, he gives his wasiyah, he gives a letter towards Farwa, that upon that day when Hussein goes towards Karbala, Qasim will be my representative. You know, whenever Sayyid al-Shuhada would look at Qasim, he would be reminded of his brother, and that pain of his brother would come to his heart. You know, Allam al-Majlisi, he records a line of poetry that Imam al-Hussein said at the grave of Imam al-Hassan. That Imam al-Hussein is quoted to have said that, "Oh brother Hassan, after you Hussein won't dye his hair anymore. And oh Hassan, the lost person isn't that person who has lost wealth. The lost person is the one who has lost a brother like Hassan al-Mujtaba." You know, on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein, Akbar would go on and Muhammad would go, but Qasim wouldn't get permission from the Imam. At one point, Qasim, he goes to his mother who was a widow. He says, "Oh mother, my uncle isn't giving permission." Farwa gives a letter to Qasim. He takes that letter to Sayyid al-Shuhada. You know, Sayyid ibn Tawus describes that final meeting between Qasim and Sayyid al-Shuhada. He says, "Fa'tanaqa," that each of them, they hug each other. "Wa and they begin to cry. "Hatta ghashi alayhima," and they cry to that point that both of them, they fall unconscious upon the ground. This is the musibah of Qasim. You know, as Qasim, he bids farewell, Hamid bin Muslim, he says that as I was looking, فَخَرَجَ إِلَيْنَا غُلَامٌ كَأَنَّ وَجْهَهُ شِقَّةُ الْقَمَرِ, that we saw a young man whose face was like the moon. But when I was looking at that young man, I noticed that his sandal was broken. At that point, Hussein, he comes out. He sits on the ground and he fixes the sandal of that young man. That this is the love Sayyid al-Shuhada had for Qasim. That point it comes that Qasim, he goes to the battlefield. As Qasim is fighting, فَقَتَلُوهُ إِرْبًا إِرْبًا, from all sides they surround Qasim. One sword hits the head of Qasim, but you know, Qasim doesn't fall to the ground. The foot of Qasim gets caught upon the horse. The horse, it begins to move. The body of Qasim is being hit on the plains of Karbala. You know, Sheikh Jaffar Shushtari, he says the reason Sayyid al-Shuhada, he only asked Qasim, "How do you find death?" is that every other shaheed, after they died, their body was trampled. Qasim is that one shaheed. Qasim was alive. The body... You know, Imam Al-Hussein, each companion would send their salams. Qasim didn't send his salams. Qasim was so young, he would say, Ya Amma adrikni, oh my uncle, help me. Imam al-Hussein, at the body of each shaheed would say a line. At the body of Abbas, he says, Al-an inkarat ala dunya ba'dak al-afa. That, oh Akbar, may this world become dust. But you know when Qasim says, Ya Amma dirikni, Imam al-Hussein says, Azza wallah ala ammek. Oh Qasim, it's difficult for your uncle that you called for help. Hussein wasn't able to help you. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-dhalimin. We ask through the right of Qasim. You know, in Tariq al-Tabari it's written that when Imam al-Hussein went to pick the body of Qasim, Humayd bin Muslim says, I was watching that scene as he picks the body. And as I was watching Hussein, I saw that he didn't have the strength to lift the body. As Imam al-Hussein was taking the body of Qasim back towards the tent, the feet of Qasim would drag across the ground and it would draw a line. We ask through the musibah of Qasim, we ask through the right of Sayyid al-Shuhada, that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they're sick and ailing, cure them. We pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Matam Hussein.
The dinner is going to be after Isha Namaz. So. तारीख के किरदारो किस बात में तुम कम हो ऐ शह के आज़ादारो किस बात में तुम कम हो ऐ शह के आज़ादारो दरिया हो समंदर हो तुम सीपे गौहर हो तुम मर्ज़ कलंदर हो सहरा में गुलेतर हो तुम मज़्म अबूज़र हो तुम फ़िक्र के कंबर हो तुम हुर का कबीला हो तुम जौन का लश्कर हो ए गम के अलमदारो किस बात में तुम कम हो ए शय के अज़ादारो रास्ता नहीं मंजिल हो धड़कन नहीं तुम दिल हो मजलूम के तुम हामी हर जुल्म के कातिल हो इंसान की अज़मत के हर बाब में शामिल हो जुल्मत के सलंदर में तुम नूर का साहिल हो मातम के तलबगारो किस बात में तुम कम हो ऐशे के निस्बत है पैगंबर से निस्बत तुम्हें हैदर से इस निस्बत मौला से तुम दूर रहे शर से तुम आँख मिलाते हो हर वक्त सितमगर से जो दर्स मिला तुमको सलमान व अबू ज़र से तुम रूप वही धारो किस बात में तुम कम हो ऐ शय के आज़ादारो अब्बास के परचम से सीखी है वफादारी आँखों में तुम्हारे है ईमान की बेदारी किस्मत से मिली तुमको मजलूम की गमखारी जालिम के लिए अब भी तुम तेग हो दो धारी मजलूम के गमखारो किस बात में तुम कम हो वह शय के زینب کی ردا تم سے کرتی ہے سوال ایسا، کس غم میں بہاتے ہو آنکھوں سے لہو اپنا، کیا گھر میں تمہارے بھی پیغام میرا پہنچا، جس دین کے لاشے پہ کام آیا میرا پردہ، لاج اس کی رکھو دیکھو کس بات میں تم کم، اے شیخ عزادارو کیا درس لیا تم نے اکبر کی جوانی سے، کیا سیکھا بتاؤ تو کربل کی کہانی سے، مت بہلو کتیبوں کے الفاظ و موانی سے، محفوظ حقیقت کو رکھنا ہے کہانی سے، اے علم کے معیارو کس بات میں تم کم ہو، اے شیخ عزادارو کس بات میں تم کم ہو، اے شیخ عزادارو کس بات میں تم کم ہو، مسجد کے مسلمانوں میدان کے بنو غازی، تم حر کی طرح مانگو ایک رات میں آزادی، دربار میں ظالم کے کیوں بنتے ہو فریادی، سجاد جس طرح دیوار ستم گاڑی، دیوار ستم گاڑو کس بات میں تم کم ہو، اے شیخ عزادارو
سلام کرب و بلا یا حسین یا مولا، سلام ہائے شہیدان کربلا وفا، ہر ایک ذرے سے ماتم کیا رہی ہے صدا، ہر ایک ذرے سے ماتم کیا رہی ہے صدا، انا زوار حسین ابن علی، 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 چلا ہوں کرب و بلا ہے زباں پہ بسم اللہ، ہے دل میں کلمہ حق لا الہ الا اللہ، سفر قبول کرے یا حسین سار اللہ، سفر قبول کرے یا حسین سار اللہ، ہم لوگ عزادار حسین ارو اللہ، ہم لوگ وفادار حسین ارو اللہ، ہم لوگ طرفدار حسین ارو اللہ، اے آقا میرے اے مولا میرے، نوکر ہے صدا زوار تیرے، انا زوار حسین ابن علی، 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 ارباب من از ذکر تو مجنونم مجنونم، سرشکستن از عشق تو قانونم قانونم، دیوان ترس ہمیشہ میکنم، دیوان ترس ہمیشہ میکنم، ہر چے کے بیگم از تو کمے ارو اللہ، عشقت برمن محترم ارو اللہ، زیبائی یہی از علم ارو اللہ، انجا وسیع منحرم ارو اللہ، زوار تو عام مقصود منی، منو کرتم آقا منی، انا زوار حسین ابن علی، انا زوار حسین ابن علی، انا زوار حسین ابن علی، انا زوار حسین